I wanted to do an extra video regarding the drawing of hands. Just again, because I'm hammering on the part that it is one of the most probably troublesome parts for artists to draw. So I really want you to feel comfortable with drawing hands as best as you can. And so taking a step back, what I'll do is I'll draw a couple of examples for you, breaking down the shape as I did before, and you follow along with me, and you break it down as well. And I'll talk along on the process of breaking it down for the hands. So as you know, we have our tube that makes our forearm, right? We have our tube that makes up our forearm. And it goes like this a bit, the forearm. When looking at it, even from the front, of course, I'm just not drawing the full thing, but you have your forearm here. One thing that I said in my previous video is that you can imagine that there's a bit of a sponge here. Not a sponge, it's the bone. But pretend that there's a sponge here. Because this sponge over here makes it so that the bone, there's a small bony raise, because it's the bone, it goes like this. The bone is raised slightly here. And this part is also of the bone that goes here. But the important is that you keep this bump here. This bump here. Continuing on, we have our hands. And as we saw yesterday, it's just imagine that it's a bit of a squarish rectangle, right? Squarish rectangle. And you can imagine the volume. It's a thin rectangle. So from the front, this is what it would look like. So I would just do this, right? And it's important to remember that there is a slight curvature here, just slight. That's important to remember. It's important to remember this curvature. And then you have your fingers. And again, the whole thing, key part to memorize. It's the length of the fingers. So again, the curvature is in place. Try to remember this. Try to remember this part. And also then for the thumb, same thing. And it's important to remember, again, the different length of the fingers. And if you memorize that, it's going to look so much more natural. And the knuckles as well. Shout out to knuckles. They also follow the same curvature, right? So you need to consider here. So with that, what you do is essentially you draw the fingers. Cool. We have our finger. Then one thing to keep in mind is, as you draw, to try to make it more natural, is that you would add in the knuckles. And you would add in the knuckles by just making a couple of extra lines here and there to account for the presence. But for this one, I'm not going to draw the knuckles, just to highlight the basic shape, right? I think the knuckles come in later as you become more comfortable with drawing the hand. So here you would imagine that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And then like so. So if I were to do it again, this time considering the knuckles. Same as before. Remember to add this. Then for the first rectangle, then I start, after I consider the rectangle shape in my head, I start adding in the knuckles. Essentially, as you are drawing, you are adding these bumps to the whole thing. And by bumps, you add these lines over here. Start again. Extra video on drawing hands, because drawing hands is probably the hardest piece of the puzzle. And I thought, okay, maybe let me add a couple of extra videos here just drawing the hand so that you have as reference to how I approach it when drawing the hand. As always, gotta make sure that the camera is focusing. So, as I said before, on my previous video, you start by considering the basic shape of the forearm, which is a tube. Right, and you have this thing here, which is essentially the bone going. Then you need to remember, this is important, that there's a bit of a sponge here. Not a sponge, it's where the bone connects to the bones of the hand. So you need to consider that when looking from the front, that there's this bump here on this side, looking from the front side. And then you start considering the shape of the rectangle. Right? You have your rectangle that we spoke about in the previous video. Right? And then it's all a matter of just adding the fingers, which is where most artists trip up. Again, remember, curvature, and then remember the different length of the fingers. That's super important. I cannot stress this enough. You need to remember that pinky finger, smallest, the middle finger, right, biggest, and these two, the ring finger and the other one, are the roughly the same size. And then you need to remember that there's the knuckles, because this will add a bit of a bump. You see the bump on my hand. This will add a bit of a bump to the drawing. So here, I would consider a bump here. Cool. Finger. Then the knuckles. And then, of course, for the hand to look natural, you need to have the thumb. And then you add lines here, here, and here, and to account for the bones of the hand. You can add some extra lines to account for the tendons as well. And again, here, 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 here. So if you remember, right, if you remember, and this is important, that the finger is split up into three, right? If you remember this part, the finger is split up into three. As the idea is that as you get to this stage in your line, you would account for just a bit of a curvature on your drawing. So you get here, there's a bump, a small bump. Try not to make it too obvious in the lines. It depends on how precise you want to be, but there's just a tiny bump in your lines as you get to these subdivisions of the finger. Again, the finger divides by 3. As you're drawing the line, as you get into the first subdivision, you just add a bit of a bump, just a bit, also for the other one. So that's my general idea for drawing the hand. So if I were to draw it from the other angle, right? So I'm reversing, I'm flipping the image. I have, again, my bump here for this part of the arm. Then, of course, if you're looking from this angle, you have the nail as well. You should also have the nail here, right? Like so. You see that my line isn't 100% straight. I'm adding 1, 2 to account for the bump that you see here. Tiny bump, tiny bump. In this case, it's actually a bump into the inside because on the outside of the finger, the bump is up. Here, it's like a bit of a bump into the inside, the reverse bump. How do you even say reverse bump? You see the line here. Let me zoom in. That's a problem of a one-man crew, right? Because I don't have anyone to make sure that the camera is zoomed in good enough. So yeah. There's a bump here as well. I made it a bit too pronounced. It should be more like this. But there's a bump here as well. Bump. On the thumb, there's a bump. No need to make it so pronounced, of course. Gets here, bump for the knuckles, bump for the knuckles. The sweep, right? There you go. You have another hand here. It's not 100% realistic, but I'm not trying to aim for realistic. I'm trying to aim for something that the hand looks good enough for the drawing, unless if the exception is that the hand is the most prominent piece of the drawing, right? It's very important to consider this. So the bump, right? Sponge that I was talking about. Of course, in the inside, you do need to consider the belly of the hand. You do need to consider that. Adding the lines for the knuckles. 1. So of course you have the lines to account for the subdivisions of the hand. this tiny bump that you see here, it's the nail actually. Sorry, I just need to make space here. This is the nail. So the bump here. You can also make the bump less visible, right? Because it's depends on the size of the nail, right? But like everything, you can always use your hand for reference, and then you just adjust the elements that you want to adjust. So in this case, my nails are actually short, so yeah. In this case, again, if I look at the basic shape, what's happening here is that I still have my tube, right? Still have my tube, and then I have my rectangle, right? It's just that then the thumb is doing like this. Again, remember, most important part to consider is the finger. Finger divides into 3 stages. So you need to account for that when drawing, when subdividing the finger, that there's 3 bumps. Sorry, there's 2 bumps and 3 lines that are key, which is the line where this line over here where it connects to the rectangle, right? To the big rectangle. This first line, the second line where there's the bump, and the third line where there's the second bump. So this is very important to remember when drawing. So yeah, hands, definitely tricky. Definitely tricky. I don't think there's a way out of the whole, you just gotta draw them a bunch of times. Definitely one of the trickiest elements to draw. But fortunately, hopefully you have 2 hands that you can always use your hand for reference. And the whole idea that, and the challenge as well, and you can also send me messages, is try drawing a couple of hands on your sides, either applying the basic shapes or just jumping straight up to drawing what you see with your hand. I think that I will provide my feedback. But the great thing about hands is that if they don't look natural, it immediately pops out on the drawing. You just see it. It's, ooh, what's this? Another thing, recommendation, tip is don't be shy of drawing the hands, trying it. Because the hand, like the eyes, had so much flavor to a drawing. It had so much flavor. It just looks cool. So, and be mindful not to shy away from drawing the hand. Draw it real size, accurate size. Make it a standout feature of the drawing. Don't be afraid of drawing the hand confidently. Don't hide it always in pockets. I've done that in the past as well. Just try to do your best. Yeah. I don't necessarily, by the way, I don't necessarily recommend that you buy those wooden mannequins from the hands, because those suck. Those hood mannequin hands. I think mannequins in general, the wooden mannequins, they just look terrible. They don't look like the human body at all. But fortunately nowadays you can buy ones in plastic that are so much more realistic looking. But usually you have to source them from either Japan or Korea. They're big over there on anatomy. So there's also those options that you can just purchase as well. I'm looking to purchase a plastic model of the hand. I should have bought one when I was there before my kid was born. Now I do need to wait a bit to go back to either Korea or Japan. But yeah, that's a pro tip as well. It's easy to find. I'll try to put a link here so that you can see as well. So yeah, this was hands. Next up, we're going to talk about legs, and then we're going to talk about putting it all together into a nice package and drawing a couple of shapes, drawing a couple of bodies, so that we're off to the races. Yeah.